Hello, everyone. I hope everyone isn't too hot and can make it through one more session. We are so excited to be here. We have been following Groundswell for years, and it's always been a bit of a dream. So thank you so much, Alex, and the rest of the Cherry family for inviting us to be here. It is truly an honor. We want to thank all of the Groundswell team. What you've done here is truly amazing. And a shout out to Joel Williams, which I think he's busy with another talk, but he was really what connected us to, and he's been a great supporter of ours, so it's really been great. So today we are going to share with you about our farm and our farm journey. It has been a journey of about 17 years, lots of ups and downs. We are not here to tell you how to farm, but we've actually taken a lot of our ideas from other farmers. So if you can find an idea that gets you excited to take home and do on your farm, or if somehow we can inspire you to do something you wouldn't normally do, then our goals have been met.
Yeah, or even save you from making the same mistakes that we've made. I mean, I always say, like Tannis said, our farm is kind of a big mixed up mess of ideas we've got from other farms all over the world. And just another note that we are not professional speakers. We're farmers from Saskatchewan that have been asked to come and share our farm. So bear with us as we go along. So this is our farm. Our farm is in extreme southern Saskatchewan, right against the U.S. border. We're a 12 to 14-inch annual precipitation zone, including snow. So we'll generally get 6 inches of snow, or 6 inches of rain, sorry, during the growing season. 6 to 8 is total, so we're a dryland farm. As you can see in the photo, we're very hilly. Our farm basically butts up against where they stop breaking land. Like to the west of us, there is 50 miles of unbroke native prairie. So that gives you some context of what we're, very fragile soils. Our farm is about 12,000 acres. It's predominantly owned. We rent 640 acres that has a plan to purchase that at some point. We feel strongly in owning our land because it's about building for the future and future generations. So we really want to be able to pass on all the hard work we put into our farm. We have one more interesting connection. So our family, this is a picture of my great-grandfather actually, and this was taken in Ivor. And yeah, it's kind of funny because there's a story in our family that he was a baker that was running from gambling debts when he was put on a boat in 1912 and wound up in Minton, Saskatchewan, and that's why we're here today. So if we owe anyone money, sorry, we'll settle up with you later. But yeah, we thought it was kind of a neat story, and we're planning to go down there to Ivor and to High Street apparently and see sort of approximately where it was, so we're kind of excited to be back here.
We really like this quote and put it up for a lot of presentations that we do. Just for a bit of context, when we first got married, we were a very conventional farm, farmed like most farmers. We did what Derek's dad had done in the past, high use of synthetic fertilizers, just business as usual. But Derek's dad, Herb, was quite innovative. So in the 90s, we did become a no-till farm, which was quite early for the area. So, I mean, we thought, that's a small change, but we're doing pretty good. But we found things really plateaued. And it wasn't until we found the biggest obstacle was ourselves and our mindset. It was how we were looking at farming that really was holding us back. So once we started learning from others, going to conferences and festivals, something like this is even more fun than a lot of conferences we've been to, and really learning from others, we had a lot of aha moments. So we'll go to the next one. Yeah,
so I've been using this slide for a long time, and I really like this because there's a lot of things. The monocrop is what we used to think was beautiful. And I like to ask the crowd, like, what are the things in this slide that you don't see? Is there anything you don't see? Pardon? Weeds, okay. What about disturbance? Like in the native prairie? So we're gonna tell a bit of a story just to give you some background. So in the summer of 2006, this is kind of about when we started our real shift, We wound up in Gettysburg, South Dakota. Does anyone know of or heard of Dr. Dwayne Beck? South Dakota South. Oh wow. Okay, so it's very important. So Dr. Beck is at the Dakota Lakes Research Farm, which I would probably call him sort of the grandfather of the no-till movement in North America. That it is the epicenter of where a lot of the things that we do started. And we wound up there just simply by accident, looking to buy a low disturbance disc seeder, because at the time all we could think of is if we moved less soil when we seeded, that was a good thing, because we live in a moisture limited environment. So we wound up in Gettysburg. The sales manager at the John Deere store put us in contact with Dr. Beck, because he thought if we're learning about disc seeding, we need to meet Dr. Beck. And we went back the next summer after we had seeded with our disc seeder and had all sorts of a disaster with hairpinning and learning the hard way. And went back the next summer, met Dr. Beck, and he walked us through about stripper headers, which we had never heard of, and about making it a system. But the TSN turning point for us was he takes us out. It's an 800-acre farm, so it's large-scale plots. Takes us out to these plots, and there's an irrigator running. So this is 2007. There's an irrigator irrigating, and he takes us up beside the irrigator, and it's running. Crop's headed out, beautiful crop. And he asks us, how much water do you think that irrigator's putting on? And there's one pivot within 100 miles of me, and I know if they put on more than a half an inch a turn, it runs everywhere. So we all guessed a half an inch. And he said, would you believe 2 inches in 9 minutes? No, we wouldn't believe that at all, actually, because that's impossible. And so we get off in our loafers, and we walk behind the irrigator where you can reach out and feel the water as the irrigator's moving away from us, and stand on ground, and we didn't have mud on our shoes. And there was no water running anywhere. And that was the first time I saw a person put a shovel in the soil. So we had been farming together for 8 years. We had an agronomist. Never had we seen our agronomist put a shovel in the soil. Talk about earthworm channels and soil aggregation. These were all new words. I went to college to agriculture. These were all new words. So I asked, just show me how. Obviously, I don't have no idea what I'm doing, because this is not how our soil acts at all. And if this is something we can get better at, I want to learn. So I'm a really slow learner, and it took me multiple trips back to Dakota Lakes. And one fateful trip, we're standing in line we stopped at a field day at Wing, North Dakota, which is just kind of halfway between. Our place is 9 hours from Dakota Lakes, basically, 9-hour drive. But North America, that's kind of how we measure travel. So we stop at this little field day at Wing, North Dakota, and it was mostly about cow stuff. And we used to have cows, but it didn't interest me a whole bunch. And we're standing in line for a hot dog after, and I'm asking, does anybody do this, I don't know what we called it, but they were doing bale grazing and trying to improve their soils. And does anybody do this with a grain farm? And I get a little tap on the shoulder, and I'm Gabe Brown. Would you like to come to my farm? And we didn't know who Gabe, I had no idea who Gabe was. Just a little farmer from North Dakota. Then it was beautiful, and he invited us back to his place. So we went to Dakota Lakes, stopped at Gabe's on the way home. Gabe's farm is 5 hours from my farm. Climatically, it's similar. Crop types, not as similar as I wish, but anyway, we get to his farm. He takes us out to his field. I mean, you guys, if you've seen the movies or seen anything he's done, I mean, the shovel in the soil, and it was exactly what we've all seen. It's black chocolate cake, gorgeous. We walk through his corn. It just hasn't had fertilizer. It's as good as the corn across the road. But the thing that changed my life was we walked across the grid road 200 meters from where we looked, and that soil that we put a shovel in was the soil that I had at home. And the difference was management. So for us, we knew that in order to make change, we had to change management, and that was all part of the changing mindset. So that was, and one of the things that Dr. Beck talks about that we forget about sometimes is we have to look to our native systems for the model, right? So that's our native system. So that is a native prairie that's less than a half a mile from where that monocrop was grown. That's north of 100 species of grass. There's probably 85% grasses, 10 or 15% legumes, and the balance is forbs. I think that's obviously changed since we showed up with our plows and our good ideas, but I think that's still, there's a percentage of warm season grasses, but it's permanent cover, it's live root, it's all of the, it's the soil health principles in the model for us, and it took that for us to learn.
You're up again.
So that being said, we've made a lot of change on our farm, and we just wanted to include this because we've seen guys make the switch to no-till, and these are two no-till farmers who are next door neighbors to us. And these are two different things that have happened in the last 2 years. Like I said, we get 6 or 8 inches of rain, and so that to have water running 3 meters wide out of fields, that's like, when I get a rain, I want to get it all. I mean, we know because like our number one limiting factor is not getting enough. But on the other end of the spectrum, this spring we had 3 days of sustained 100-kilometer-an-hour winds, and we had neighboring fields that lost this much topsoil. And how long does that take to build? We gained this much topsoil on our adjacent fields. It didn't kill the crop, but it really did hurt it because it's like being in a sandblaster. I felt awful for the neighbors. It really wasn't. It's not their fault. It's kind of a bad situation, a series of events that just turned out bad for them. And you think that like no-till is just a tool. It's one of the many, and we'll get into that. But I really wanted to highlight these because we're still seeing the extremes.
So yeah, it really is a journey, and it's really hard sometimes when you're out there every day with your shovel to really see changes. In 2019, we had a person come doing an article, and they said, well, let's dig in the soil and compare, soil that you farmed for a long time, and then we told them we had just bought some new land. We're like, yeah, I guess we can. So we did, and we ourselves were shocked to see the difference in that first picture of what our soil looked like that we had been managing quite differently than our neighbor had been before we bought it. And then shortly before we left, Derek's like, maybe we should take another picture and compare again. And so we were quite excited to dig in, find some worms. But yeah, I mean, it's not you can't do one thing and all of a sudden you've changed your soil. It's a slow process. And we have some years where we feel we go backwards. Just as some struggle too wet, we struggle too dry, and sometimes it's really hard, but we'll take you through a little bit of the farming practices that we've done on our journey. Derek talks about when we went to Dakota Lakes and we went to Gabe's, but it's when Derek went to Dakota Lakes and Derek went to Gabe's. Because when he first started going, he'd take his buddies, and he'd come back and tell me this stuff, and I'd be like, okay, yeah, okay. Whatever. I can't believe your husband. You need to hear it from the source. But he did go once he went to a conference and seen Dr. Elaine Ingham speak. And she's all about the soil food web and looking at your soil with a microscope. And before I got married, I was a high school biology teacher. So he piqued my interest there. So I got to get a microscope, and I took the courses to learn how to identify the microbes in our soil, which was really exciting because we had made this shift to focusing on the soil. But until you see what's actually in your soil and all of the life, that was my aha moment, and we need to be caring for this biology. So I was so excited, get my soil sample, gonna see what's in there, and it was very disappointing. It was a whole lot of bacteria, a lot of little dots. So we knew we had a lot of work to do.
So that was 2017, so this has been 7 years since I'd met Gabe. We had been making major changes. That was probably one of the most disappointing moments because it makes it real. I kind of liken this to farming without knowing your bank account balance. Like, I'm an optimist, right? So it's fine. We just keep spending money and buying stuff and it's gonna work out. But once you see it, it's like, it's not there. So that was a very sobering moment.
Yeah. So that's when we kind of made our farm motto loyal to the soil, and really kept in mind every operation, everything we do on our farm, how is it going to affect our soil biology? It's not always going to be perfect, but if we're doing something a little bit harmful, what can we do to make up for that? And it's always in the forefront of our mind. So farming systems, a lot of times we're like, well, what did you do? Well, it's been a long journey. We've done a lot of things. It's constantly changing. And it's a system. It isn't just a linear one thing. You do one thing and then it leads to another. So we're going to try to narrow it down for you today, and we're going to focus on low disturbance, diversity, and nutrient balancing. But all of that really comes back to having a live root. And I mean, address that. It's really what is going to feed your biology, get your system really going. So the longer and the more we can have a live root, that's always the goal.
Yeah.
Before we continue on, we want to do a shout out to our team, because we couldn't even be here today if it wasn't for our great people at home and that work with us, our son and daughter. We've got a full-time staff of 4, which are great, and they've been keeping everything going while we're gone. Derek's dad, who we really have to thank the most, because it's not easy for someone who's owned a farm to step back and not just let their son and his wife take the reins, but take the reins and go running. And a lot of times he says, I don't know what you're doing, but it looks good. So he isn't overly interested, but he's been happy with our results, so we'll take that. And now we do have an agronomist that helps walk and be more eyes on the field so that we can be more proactive instead of reactive. So first, disturbance. When you talk about your farming system, what do you think of about disturbance to your soil? What causes disturbance? Sorry? Chemical
Good.
and physical.
Any more? Tillage.
Yeah. So we're going to run through a few of ours today on how we have really worked to try to reduce our disturbance, both chemical and physical.
I could do a 2-hour talk just on this subject. We have owned or had on our farm basically every single disc and double disc drill available in Western Canada over the years, and it's caused Tannis a lot of gray hairs, including 5 different planters. I don't even know how many disc drills, 7 or 9 maybe in the last 17 years. And it's always been, I've always struggled with, there's always something wrong. You know, it's one thing or another. And we've landed on a drill that we're pretty happy with. We've had it for 2 seasons in a row, which is a personal best.
Can you state right here that we are not changing next year? Can I get that in writing? No, he won't even.
Yeah, we're getting quotes on new ones. So. And anyway, I love this. So this is a long distance away, but we've always struggled when we think about disturbance, right? Even in our low disturbance no-till seeding, we've always struggled with openers because we seed, our window is short. So we start when the snow leaves, and lots of times our soils are actually wet and cold. But when we run on them, like the disc drills that have side wheels, we found we always had compaction because we have a tremendous amount of wind in southern Saskatchewan. So what happens are if we run on them when they're wet and then the wind blows, it makes our soils hard. We'll wind up with substantial sidewall compaction, sidewall smearing, which is not a good environment for root development, especially early on when it's super important. So we've landed on this, yeah, there's a disc drill, it's a double disc offset. I mean, I think Tony's here. Tony Gent is I think it's available in here on a weaving. This is a K-Hart in Canada, an 18 meter, but we're really, I think we're happy. We're really, really close. But I think it's because it's like when you start, it's so important to have a good start and good early root development because we're in challenging conditions and we just want to make sure we have good root growth.
And leaving the cover on the soil.
Yeah.
Like quite honestly, I take out hot meals to the guys running the drills in the evening, and a lot of times I can't tell where they have and hadn't seeded.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing. It's not always great for me because I'm trying to figure out where to find them. But I mean, that's what we want. We want to keep this soil intact.
Yeah, we have to run shared guidance, like so the drills can see where each other are because they can't tell. So for us, because we had trouble early on, you know, we were running older combines. We were cutting 36 feet and we were spreading 20, and we were trying to seed in that with a disc seeder, and it was a train wreck the first couple of years until, you know, Dr. Beck, you know, he told me once the first year and we didn't listen. And then finally we went back the second year because we did the same thing in a row. And then we finally started buying, in 2009, we started buying stripper headers, like Shellborn stripper headers. I think they're also made here. So they just take the grain, they leave the straw stand. So for us, there's lots of benefits. Obviously, combine efficiency goes way up, but it's also, because we get a lot of our moisture as snow, when we can leave stubble stand this tall, in the wintertime, every snow event comes with wind. So when the snow comes, we can capture the snow. I call it harvesting snow because it actually will get, because we're hilly, when the wind blows with snow, the hilltops are bare and you'll have 6-foot snowbanks on the side hills. And then in the spring, when that melts, it's a bit of a nightmare. But when we have the strip stubble, it actually keeps a nice even blanket of snow and the ground doesn't freeze because we'll see -40. We don't like it, but it happens. So this will help insulate the ground. We think it helps, obviously our soil biology. And then in the spring, because the ground isn't froze as much and the snow catches even, those will normally be the first fields we farm. I distinctly remember walking into the coffee shop in Minton in 2010 after we had stripped and we had a tremendous amount of snow. And Axten's, they won't be seeding until July because it did look weird and no one had ever seen this before. They had me worried. But anyway, it's been unbelievable. As long as there's a little bit of straw sticking out, and we found that the snow stays softer and more mellow, so the snow melts and runs, and our infiltration, and then once we seed, we kind of get a nice ground cover, and it just works really well. Moisture retention, capture, and water use efficiency is probably one of our largest priorities, along with obviously fostering soil biology. And there was a Nuffield had done his studies on controlled traffic farming. He was from Alberta, which is the neighboring province, and we had gone to some field days. And this is, it's just another tool, right? So it's just choosing an area to drive and choosing an area to farm. Basically, we've been control traffic for 9 seasons. I think 2014 we started, 2015. Anyhow, so it's just a system of trams, permanent trams that we're a 9-meter system. So our combines are 30-foot heads. Seeders are 60 feet, sprayers 120, basically. So that's kind of how we do, because we're just trying to do everything we can to, and obviously, we need gas exchange for soil biology to function. So we want to have as much aeration we can in the soil. And I think maintaining structure, currently, maybe someday we're going to have robots that'll do this for us. But right now we have very heavy farm equipment in order to cover the ground that we have. And we think CTF is a tool at the time that helps us with that. So. This is we were the first ones, I think, in Western Canada to bring these in. They're a very interesting, unique add-on, and I think imperative to control traffic agriculture in Western Canada, at least, is that they're chaff decks. So what they do is there's a divider goes in the back of our combines, and there's a divider that basically captures the heaviest portion of the chaff that normally gets spread on the field, but in the heaviest portion of the chaff will be weed seeds and then all the grain that John Deere combines throw over. But it puts that chaff and grain in 2 rows in our trams, so where we drive, and it gets dropped. So our tram, my biggest fear in a controlled traffic system was tram line erosion, because that's a road that you can't, once you go, it's not good. We don't want that. Nightmare fuel. So it's kind of been problem solved. And they're super light. They don't take any horsepower. It's a form of mechanical weed control. So when the weeds go through, I know there's lots of other ways guys are trying to do it, but this doesn't take any horsepower or diesel fuel. So it's low impact. It's easy. So chaff decks are awesome. This one's been interesting. Disturbance, chemical. That one probably weighs on me as much as the physical. We've got organic farming friends that we talk about the same things, and we're all trying to get to the same place, right? We're just trying to get the disturbance out and get back to some kind of a functioning system. And for us, we want to get as much of the synthetics out, whether it's fertilizer or herbicides. 3 falls ago or 4 falls ago, I was driving a sprayer, and we were doing, in the fall, it's very, very common to do a glyphosate application in the fall after the crop is off. I have lots of neighbors that spray the crop because they get a bitter kill on their weeds, which is a different day for a different conversation. But we wait till after harvest, and then we'll spray Canada thistle, like multiple thistles that are perennial, kind of semi-perennial weeds, grasses that are hard to kill. And I'm driving through the field, and I'm like, I'm hardly spraying anything. And we're just spraying the whole field, and it's driving me insane. So I got on the phone, the YouTube, and like there's this weed it system that had been pretty well already established in Australia. And we get looking, and it's available on these Agrifac sprayers that are built in Netherlands, this technology, which is a green on brown. So we bought this, but the other really interesting technology that they have is this a dynamic dose, which allows us to do nozzle by nozzle variable rate. Our farm is swap mapped. We variable rate as many things as we can, mostly seeding rates and residual herbicides, because we find our farm, like in our swap map, so our zone 10 is like our lowest, wettest. If there's salinity, it's in our 10s. Our zone 1 is our highest, hilltop, sandy, light, lack of organic matter. So we'll have 1.5% or 2% organic matter hilltops, but we'll have 6.5% organic matter low spots. Our better fields are kind of 3 and 6.5, and our poor fields are 1.5 and 5. But a lot of residual, I don't know if you guys use residual herbicides, but in Western Canada, our residual herbicide application rates are based upon organic matter. So when you're so there's no way to win this battle when your fields look like that. So we're putting on application rate. In order to get weed control in our 10s, we got to put a rate on our 1s that is hurting everything. So this sprayer allows us to do that nozzle by nozzle. So we run a 10 centimeter polygon, which is like, I don't even know what our polygon, it's a lot in a field. So it's like when we look at our resolution, you can't see breaks in our polygons. Like it's just full resolution. And it's one of the few things that we've invested in that we saw a 1 year turnaround. Like all of a sudden our hilltops were growing better crops. And we're just like, we were doing that to ourselves. So that's been a real big one. You can see the difference of application rate, like so from 84 units to nothing, and this is all in one field. And we haven't seen a change in weed control. The amount of herbicide we're buying is lower, and our crop yields have increased. Another interesting side note, with the weed in our fall sprays, last fall, we sprayed just under 10,000 acres, and we were 9.5% coverage. So instead of spraying 10,000 liters of glyphosate, we sprayed 950. I mean, that's the kind of things that I think over time are going to, that's going to change how our systems function. So.
Okay, so that was our disturbance piece. Now we're going to quickly go into diversity. Diversity, we find, is so important. Tell me about some diversity you have on your farms. What do you do to add diversity? Anything? Grow the same thing every year? Rotation. Cover crops, thank you.
Excellent.
So yeah, we're gonna go through some of what we do to add diversity to our farm. So I said I'll quickly do a slide and just, jot down the few crops that we've seeded this year, grab my maps, because we're really trying to, at one time we were trying everything, and we decided it was too much. Every time, you go to seed, it takes time to clean out, same with harvest. Went to make this list and I was like, oh, okay, I guess we've got quite diverse again. But we love it for the soil, and it's nice to have the diversity out there.
After we specifically said we're not growing more than 8 crops this year, and somehow it dialed into 14. Some of those are intercrops, and that's 2 for 1. One of the things when I was walking Gabe's field 2010 the first time, and we're walking, and he showed us his corn, but we went to some cover crops, and that's the diversity in those cover crops and how everything looked so good was the thing that just stuck with me, and the fact that there was no fertilizer. And it just, all of those things, or everything I've been told is wrong. And so I come home, and to a relatively understanding family and farm partners, like we need to add diversity, and I don't know how to do it. And we're a grain farm, so it's, what do you do? And I think there was some tractor forum or some online thing back in the IBM days, and got reading about guys that are intercropping. So they're growing more than one crop together. And I just cold called a couple of guys. Both of them have become good friends. What are you guys doing? What are you seeing that's working? The first year we did a canola pea because herbicides lined up, and it was scary right? Because we don't know what we're doing, and I don't want to mess, and the neighbors will talk, and all of the above, right? So we did a canola pea, the herbicides lined up, and I still say to this day that the reason that we're intercropping as much as we are is it just clicked, and it worked. We only had 300 acres the first year, and it was fantastic. We over yielded like crazy. We actually had a hailstorm. Some of it was hail. It still yielded better than our monocrops on their own. So everything about it just screamed, do more of this.
Did you catch that 300 acres. This is a trial for Derek. Like, we'll just do 300 acres. It's not a big deal.
So we have to buy canola seed every year in Canada. I'm not sure how it works here, but it's most of it's GMO. Some of it's not, but most of it is. And you basically have to buy new seed every year. You can't keep it back. There's all these agreements, and I don't like that. We believe strongly in epigenetics, and that was one of the things too that even back then that Dr. Becken gave it both iterated, like keeping your own seed keep as much as you can. So instead of growing canola, we've chosen, we switched to yellow mustard, which is a very similar, it fits in the rotation the same, but we can keep our own seed of that. It's open pollinated. We've had the same mustard seed since 2012. We just keep a little bit. So, I think the epigenetics year on year have been helping it. And then we started with yellow peas, which is a very commodity type pea. But we soon figured out that because the peas trellis in the mustard, we can start growing some specialty peas that are higher value. So we grow like an Austrian winter pea for the US cover crop market. And they're significantly higher value because they're awful on their own and no one wants to grow them because they lay on the ground. But in an intercrop, they trellis and the harvest is relatively easy. So that was kind of one of the first ones that we really went with.
So how big was your trial when you tried chickpea and flax the first time?
In 2013, I had heard about, so we're in the dry part of Saskatchewan, let's say. And I had heard there's a research farm at Redverse, Saskatchewan, which is 50% more rainfall than we are. And chickpeas, I'm not sure if anyone's familiar, but chickpeas are a little bit like sheep and they spend their days looking for ways to die. So we had heard that this research farm, which is way wetter than us, is growing chickpeas successfully in an intercrop with flax. So I've got to see this. So we drove up to their field day and they look great, and our monocrop ones looked like you'd imagine, they're dying. So 2014, and I don't. So we went home and the next spring, we seeded 1,400 acres of flax and chickpeas, and there again, they just clicked. And it went from being the crop that you cringed at growing, and the only reason we would grow them is because the cash flow was awesome. We grew them, and we knew we're gonna have this horrible fungicide, because traditionally, monocrop chickpeas will be sprayed somewhere between 5 and 7 times with fungicide. Like, they're not potato bad, but they're up there. When we grow a chickpea flax intercrop, most years we can do no fungicides, and if we have a bad year, we'll spray. We will. And I always say there's not many hills I'll die on. I mean, we still have to grow grain. I don't like it, but we will have to do what we have.
We don't know if it's it's the alternated row. So with the flax in between, that allows better airflow so that the chickpeas, you don't have this dense canopy that's holding moisture in. But it's amazing the reduction in disease. So the flax, chickpea, mustard pea, those are all alternate rows. We've tried combined rows, and it's funny, we were talking with Andy the other day about, and in my mind, and Joel, we're all like, they should be in the same row because early root interaction is essential, and all of the things that you think should make it better, but the combine yield monitor and so on tells me that alternate row is better. Partly, I think, because in our environment, like, we're dry, so we seed our mustard at appropriate depth, which is shallow, and our peas need to be deeper, because sometimes we don't get an opening rain until June. So we have to seed to moisture. This is another new one. We wanted to grow some spring wheat and peas, and it's the spring wheat's actually, it's a varietal blend, but we wanted to grow it with peas, and I made same thing, I made some calls to a couple of guys, and one guy told me it was great, and one guy told me it was shit. So I'm an optimist, so we seeded about 1,000 acres of that to try out. But what we did do different this year is we tried on some really high carbon residue fields and some that are lower carbon, just to see what kind of a reaction, because one of the most unique things about intercrops is they're kind of like kids, like there's never two of them the same. We find that every year is different, and one will be stronger than the other, but they're always better together. Yeah, we don't have a lot of time to spend on intercrops, but on July 2nd, we will be at Andy Howard's for their little field day there, which is a little bit more focused on intercrops. And I think you can register for that on Joel Williams' website. Yeah. Yeah, this is another idea. Controlled traffic has downsides. And what we found is, because I'm a bit of a purist when it comes to controlled traffic, so I don't like guys turning in the fields. So we find ourselves running down our trams and driving on our headlands more, so the headlands get more traffic. So one of the ways we've thought
And I saw this in Iowa the first time, and I thought, it's some of the most expensive farmland in North America. And I see guys with pollinator boundaries on their land, and I think if they can do that in Iowa, we could probably afford to do it in some of the cheapest land in North America where we live. So we started adding pollinator boundaries, and we knew like the idea of adding places for predators and pollinators was a good idea, and it just made sense. And we've put some in, and a lot of ours have kind of turned into an alfalfa, a lucerne kind of monocrop. But it's funny how this year then we've got so normally we leave them and then we fall graze them just as standing because we have anyway, we'll get into the cows in a bit, but it's funny how this year a whole bunch of sandpoint came that we didn't have last year, and now we have a bunch of sandpoint. So it's always interesting to see what they do. But
that's the nice part about diversity is that depending on the year, different things do better, but if the seed's there, it grows.
Yeah, and we use them a bit to our advantage. We square up our fields so like our CTF is like even passes then, so. And it gives us a bit of room to turn on the headlands. So, cover crops. We've tried about as many options as you can imagine. We've had some really bad experiences with, and this is just as being as transparent as I can. We've had some really bad experiences with high diversity cover crops having weed issues. And I don't know how else to say it other than I don't want to paint the picture that they're perfect and you're not going to have any problems. So we've honestly chosen to do more like 2 species, 3 species, 1 species cover crops to really address a specific issue and try to roll with that. Our window in the fall is very small, so it's not every acre every year, but we do as many acres as we can. The 2 that we really use a lot are daikon radish as much as we can because they are phenomenal, and chickling vetch. Chickling vetch is a cool season legume. It's a pea vine, but I have never seen it. So I don't know if you guys can see, but on a clod, and we see this all the time, when we pull it, when we dig a plant and see a clod, that's where a root grows. So we see darkening around the root sheath in the soil, and there's nothing else we grow that does that, and it's a legume. A lot of the legumes in our systems actually take carbon, where we found that and they're also a super high-end fixture, so I don't know how it works, magic, the biology, whatever, but it's one, if we have time, chickling vetch, we grow our own seed, so chickling vetch goes in, 25, 30 pounds an acre, and it's super frost tolerant, so it grows way late. The only downside is the seeds are poisonous to livestock, so you got to be a little bit careful about how mature it gets if you're going to put cows on it. We've had it happen, the cows haven't died yet.
But they're not ours.
Onto
that.
As far as Ryan knows, none have died. Perennials and livestock. And I'm going to be at Farmer Tom's Things That Have Gone Wrong event tomorrow, because we'll talk about the things that have gone wrong in our livestock integration. But we both grew up on livestock farms. We were both in B4H, and cows were part of our operations. But BSE I'm sure you guys know, BSE was not fun. If you were a cowboy. We sold our cows in 2007. It took us 3 years to sell our pasture. You could not sell pasture at all. But the people who bought it moved a home. We sold them an acreage. We sold them our pasture. They moved a home in. They've had kids, and they've become some of our best friends. And they have a very large beef operation now. They have 12 or 1,400 female, mature cows. We have a group of about, I don't even know. That's a picture from a week ago when we moved some heifers onto one of our fields, 400 or 500. So it's really nice that we're able to bring on large groups. So they're basically doing amp grazing. We have an amount of small paddocks that are fenced permanently, but then we'll cut it up with hot wires and move them around. But they've been I'll get into what went wrong at Tom's.
So in the fall, they'll graze our cropland after we've harvested and the ground just froze up. But throughout our land, we have patches that are not farmable, that are native prairie, or we've just seeded back to grass when Derek's dad had tried to farm them and it just really wasn't working. So we've got lots of paddocks throughout our land, and so that's why this time of year you'll still see cows on our land. Yeah, so there's about 2,000 acres of native prairie and seeded perennial pasture on our farm that we run the cows on. So it works quite well. We have to help supply water, and sometimes we have to help chase cows. Ooh, there's a breeze.
The other perennial that was new to us that we seeded 500 acres of Kernza I really feel strongly about having a perennial rotation in our farm. I think it's something I've been missing. I've been putting off. I think about it a lot, and we just did it. So we seeded it 10 days ago. It's sprouted. We're not sure what we're going to do with it exactly, but we seeded 500 acres. And I think it's maybe a grain farmer's version of getting perennials into our system, and I'm not sure how it'll work, but we really like the idea of like these lower yielding, higher value crops like Kernzus, like mustard, a lot of the crops we grow that we're not having to take a lot. Because I think one of the things that it took me a while to understand was not trying to outproduce our environment, I think, which is something I had a habit of trying to do.
It'll be really interesting for us to go home because we've never been gone this long during our growing season. So to go back, we're going to be gone a total of 10 days. So to see, we went for a little walk and a crop check before we left, trying to make mental pictures, because when we go home, it's going to be a huge difference. So we're a little excited, a little nervous, but.
I have so much anxiety.
The last one we'll quickly go through is nutrient balancing. So we used to do a lot of traditional soil testing. Even I would, take soil samples and look at the biology, but I soon found if I wanted to find lots of biology, I'd just take a sample to where a healthy plant was grown. That's where I'd find lots of fungi, protozoa, nematodes. It's when I would take it, in a spot that didn't have any cover, so it was so variable. So we were really curious as to what are the plants really taking up what's in the plants, and we started sap testing.
So that came, that was one of Joel's, when we first met Joel, we were at a Graham State deal and Joel was there talking too, and that was the first time sap testing was a new word, didn't know. We did tissue testing, but apparently they're different. And, we had learned then. And so that's when we started sap testing and then realized that we have things that are so out of whack. And that's when Joel started helping us build these micro programs, trying to fill in the gaps, because when the glaciers left Saskatchewan, not only did it leave us lots of hills and rocks, but there's just some things that just aren't there. So what we try to do is augment them with micronutrients and biological foods is basically what our fertility program looks like now. That I think we'll have a slide of that after. But this is what our saps look like. So after 9 years or 8 years of working towards this. So basically what we do is we take last year's sap analysis on multiple crops, and basically what we find is that our cereal crops and our broadleaf crops are kind of similar. It's more crop specific than field specific, which still hurts my head, but that's how it seems. And I'm assuming it has to do with root exudates. Intercrops are the same too, that we see differences. So this field, the reason I like to show this, we got kind of two slides because the slide is so big, but this field hasn't seen nitrogen. I'm gonna back up. In 2017, after Tannis took Elaine's courses, we didn't, in 2017, we used zero synthetics. We went full biology.
I was really looking out for my biology. I said no more synthetic.
No, it's this, it was kind of the common denominator. We had pulled back on everything else. What else can it be? Why else does our biology suck? So is it that? Well, there's one way to find out, so we just won't put any on. 2017 turned out to be a dry year, so it didn't matter. Our crops looked like our neighbors' crops. It was super dry, it was kind of disappointing, but it was a good year to pull the Band-Aid off. Since then, we've been applying basically about 100 pounds of ammonium sulfate, so 100 units of product, so 20 units of N on just our monocrops that aren't legumes. So our monocrop cereals, monocrop buckwheat, flax, so on, right? Anything intercrop gets nothing, and the nothing actually on intercrop started when we started intercropping, so 2011. So we're not using much nitrogen is what I'm trying to say, 20 units every other year. So this field actually hasn't had nitrogen in 2 years. That's Corzan wheat, and we have lots of nitrogen. Nitrogen is...
I'm going to tattle on you a little bit because we had done some sap testing, and in the time, it takes a little time to get there. Derek's looking at our crop and he's panicking. We haven't put nitrogen on in 2 years. We got to do something. We got to do something. It's well, let's wait for the saps. Well, no, they're going to take another day. Can't wait, can't wait. He's got to buy a load of AMS so that we have this ammonium sulfate on hand. We get the test back. There's lots of nitrogen. So
this is, and our agronomist is from a very conventional background, and she's very understanding, and Kendall's awesome. I mean, she's a sounding board for us, and she's got way better eyes than I do, and way more patience. But she had been she said, the saps hadn't been back, we were stressing out. But actually, we thought Nova or the male had lost them, and like we have to go to England, right? So we better just, anyway, so we pushed the panic button, which was an absolute mistake. And
so you try to be confident in what you're doing, and you think you know what you're doing, but it's so hard not to second guess yourself when you watch your neighbors applying all this fertilizer and you're not sure, is yours the same green? Is that even how we measure how much nitrogen is in, by looking at the color? What is healthy now? We don't even know what the right color to look for is. So even we panic a lot, but it's just what we do.
We had,
you skip this one?
Yeah, I mean, just to show, I mean, the only thing we're a little, like the chloride, which is tough, and we're a little light on boron, but that's because we're at 8 pH of soil pH. But I mean, it's really interesting how to see that, like with that little nitrogen, how nitrogen is just not our limiting factor when we get everything kind of in balance. Interestingly enough, those were so Corey St. Clair, one of John's agronomists, and Sean, I can't remember his last name, sorry. I was concerned that I was doing something wrong, because when we had got our results back, and we had already spread some acres, not those acres, but we had spread some acres, and I talked to them, and I'm like, maybe I'm doing it wrong. Maybe I'm pulling the wrong parts of the plant. Maybe I don't know. Because this nitrogen thing, it's very consistent across our farm. So they came to the farm, and we pulled plants, and they showed me how they do it, which was slightly different than what I did. And lo and behold, the results are basically the same. So how, this has been very long, anyhow. So what we do basically is we focus on biological foods and nutrient balancing. So we get as many dry ingredients as we can because we're cheap. And so we solubilize as much as we can. But we were having a little bit of trouble with solubilization. We were having trouble with murkiness and things plugging, and no one wants to plug, because it's when you're seeding, you're stressed as it is, and the last thing you want is more trouble. So this past season, we invested in a very large water system. So we have our mixing shed is inside an insulated building, obviously, because of the winter thing we get. And so we have a large RO, but we're experimenting with water structuring. So I don't know, the jury's out. But what all my guys tell me is they've never seen our mixes work so awesome. We had zero downtime. When they were putting micros in, manganese, zinc, iron, copper, it was just like Kool-Aid. It was like dumping sugar in hot coffee. It was gone. Instead of us having to mix for 15, 20, 30 minutes, it was just like in solution, see you later. So we do like the nutrient balancing based upon our past sap. So we just kind of add, and there's some things we have to be careful with, like zinc is hard on legume inoculants and some things that we have to be really careful with. But then we're like calcium, kelp, or molasses, amino acids. It looks like an organic mix, basically, is what goes in our furrow. And we've been doing that since 2018. So that gets mixed up. We have some big main stainless tubs that are on scales, and one of our guys just basically looks after that baby. And then we just haul it to our seeders. We carry saddle tanks on our seeding tractors, and then we use peristaltic pumps. There's a guy over somewhere here. I can't remember. I got his card, but there actually is we go to these things and we'll use peristaltic pumps, like we call them squeeze pumps. And generally, no one else, we got ours from Australia, but generally no one has the squeeze pumps. But there's a guy with squeeze pumps here, so go find the guy, because it just took the pain out of the liquids. Because our liquids are kind of thick and chunky, and I used to use the analogy of like you can put a cat in a blender and it'll meter that, which is good, like it'll take anything.
We don't really do that.
So that's just like something to think about, but it's really, because we want thick and we want concentrated, because we want concentrated nutrients and goodness at the roots. So that's like orifice systems really don't work. And anyway, so the squeeze pumps have been an answer. So yeah, that's kind of what it looks like.
Yeah, so we kind of went through our farming system. So I hope you can see the passion we have for what we grow, how dedicated we are. It's very disheartening to grow this grain and then haul it out and dump it into the conventional system. It was breaking our hearts. We wanted this to go to people who really care about where their food comes from. But there was no stream for that, so Derek decided we should fix that. So on our farm, we built a seed cleaning plant. We decided to make it food grade, HACCP certified. And then, because we were bored, I guess, we decided to also put in a flour mill, so that now on our farm, we can grow, harvest, clean, mill, whole grain flour right on site. So this is just on the other side of the trees from our yard, and there's lots we can tell about this, but we're out of time. So we have another talk tomorrow, which we called Growing Food, that will get more into where do we go from here. Now we've got grains, flour, now what? Which hopefully you have the answer. No. And yeah.
Yeah, I think that gives us 5 minutes for questions. If anyone has any, by all means.
Yeah, any questions or, yeah, whew, thank you.
That's good. Thanks. Oh,
Maybe you guys are melting as much as we are.
It is sweltery.
Hello. Very interesting talk. Thank you very much. Just had a quick question about your biological food mixes. When were you applying that? Was it at drilling or into the crop?
No, very good question, because I just assume people know things. Sorry. Yeah, so we mix it up and it goes right in furrow, as close to the seed as possible.
When we're seeding.
When we're seeding, during seeding, with the seed. We do some some seed coating, some biological seed dressings as well, but the balancing comes from the in-furrow product. It's like 55 or 60 liters per hectare. We'd be in that volume, like not super high. You see?
Well, I know you come from the frost country. I believe Canadians know what winter is. So what is your opinion of frost seeding, ultra early, playing with the thawing and melting and temperature raising and springing? What is your experience of that?
Well, we've found ultra early is really good, and I wanted to push that. So last November, we had a super weird winter. We would get snow and it would go. So last November, I loaded the drill and went and seeded 500 acres, because for some reason in my mind it was going to work great, because they do it. Dakota Lakes does it every year. They dormant seed into frozen ground, and it was a disaster. We had to terminate it.
Yeah, it had potential. But
oh, it was bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm the optimist. But yeah, like for us, really as early as we can move.
Our only risk is we sometimes have a frost, like in May.
Yeah.
But generally, too, because of our limited moisture, as soon as we can get that in the ground, we can catch as much rain as coming our way.
There's times that we have to winterize. We have to winterize the liquid systems on our seeders because we can't get them inside. So we have to.
One downfall of not using fertilizer, you now have, it's all liquid that can freeze.
It's all
right?
water-based, so what happens is.
We learned that the hard way.
Yeah. There's that. Oh, we got one back there, one more here. Good.
Hello. Just interesting, how do you do your intercropping? Because do you do it twice? Do you do it at the same time?
That's right. So, sorry, yeah. Our seeders, like our sort, we have John Deere commodity carts, they have 3 compartments. So we have our drills set up. And one thing that K-Hart was awesome about was we were able to order our drills from K-Hart ready to seed alternate rows. So we have 1 row of one crop and 1 row of another crop, and we can just do it simply by moving some. It takes a 15-minute. It takes longer to fill the seeder than it does to change things around. So we seed them at the same time, harvest them at the same time. Some of them you'd think it doesn't make sense, but there's something happens with senescence. Like it's like when you put your brown bananas by your ripe bananas or whatever, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden they're all brown and you have to make banana bread. But there's some senescence, there's some signaling that goes on and then the harvest pans out. Because I tell you, a couple of times my dad, Herbie, he's just like, what did you do that for? And then it seems to work out. So I think there was one in the front. Like flax and lentils is one that we've done that should not have worked. Like the crops are generally 25 days apart, and they senesce together.
You talked about the mindset change being the biggest thing. Can you characterize the sort of elements of that mindset change? Or is that too tricky?
I've got something that I should have said earlier, and maybe it isn't specific to that, but you can maybe finish, is that when I went to Beck's the first time in Gabe's and all those things, I took my buddies. And none of those guys followed along, and some of them bought disc drills and stripper headers, and they went through a phase, but that's the only thing they changed. And all of those guys today are seeding with shank drills and picking rocks and cutting with MacDons and going to the lake. They went back. The real change happened when I started taking Tannis. When we went together. Sorry, it wasn't like, I mean, it's...
Finally let me out of the house.
Yeah. But when we started going together, and that's when change really started to happen.
I think that is huge, because Derek, like I said, he'd come home and have all these great ideas, and it's like, you want to change drills again? You want to buy what? Like, why? And until I started going and seeing guys like Ray Archuleta and Gabe Brown and even Odette and hearing John Kemp, all these great people, and really understanding what was going on, then we could talk. We were finally speaking the same language. So we think that support system is really important, whether it's your dad or your brother or your wife or a friend. Having a sounding board, something like this. I mean, a lot of our friends are around the world that we talk to. And the exciting part is this whole regenerative movement, we have met the kindest, most genuine people of our entire lives. And it feels like a family. And I really hope the lady that I walked into her tent this morning feels the same way. Sorry about that. Wrong tent. So the whole mindset, it took us a while, but having like-minded people around has been really important, but also not just sticking to that, because it's nice to talk to other people to challenge you, because sometimes, you just keep patting yourself on the back, oh, you're doing a good job, you're doing a good job. It's nice to be challenged and find out, really have to kind of think about what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Yeah, because agriculture and farming is hugely social, right? I mean, we struggled early on when we were the weird farmers, and this regen wasn't a word yet, 2008, 2010, we're doing things different. Like, there was a time we had gone through and we don't get invited to the community Christmas party anymore, and the things that those things happen. And then I'm not sure what happened, but now we're just those farmers, and everything's kind of back to normal. But we did go through it. There was a noticeable time, and and I think now, not saying that maybe some of you guys are experiencing the same thing, but I think the support system, this festival, this ability to come and converse with other farmers and get ideas and build confidence and all of those things that I wish, Blackberry was a new thing when we started. We really struggled, right, to get ideas and to continue on. Trust me, I had lots of what the hell am I doing moments.
He still does. But.
Like this year even. So, but no, it's come. This is great. Come here, get energized, meet new people, and it's awesome. So.
Yes, thank you very much for listening.